Hi, I'm Tony Northrup, and today I'm going to give you an overview of how to use the Panasonic GH4. This is my favorite video camera in the world because it records 4K and it's so light and easy to use. It's got a great touchscreen. I'm going to be covering the features of it as a still camera and as a video camera. So if you already know part of this, or if you don't care about still cameras, check the table of contents in the description and jump right to what you're interested in. If you are a videographer and you've already mastered it, I'm also going to be making some hardware recommendations, specific lenses, microphones that I use, and other little gadgets like a sunshade that have really made things much easier for me. So again, check that table of contents. If you have a different camera, or if you like this tutorial and you have a friend who has a different camera, you can send them to sdp.io/tutorials, and there's a whole list of all of the tutorials that we've created in this same format for many different types of cameras, and I hope it all helps out. First, I'll go over the basic physical controls of it, stuff you probably already worked out. Again, check that table of contents and skip forward. How to detach and attach the lens. There's a button over here on the left side of the camera. Twist the lens clockwise to remove it. When you put it back on, take that red dot, line it up with that on the body, and twist it clockwise until it clicks. Then just wiggle it back and forth, make sure it's on there nice and steady. There's a couple other compartments. Over on the right side here, we have the compartment for the memory card. Slide that back, and it pops open with a spring. Takes SD cards. You might need a faster SD card to record 4K video, but we use 600X 128 gigabyte cards all the time and have never had a problem with those 600X ones. They're pretty cheap, my recommendation for it. Push the SD card in until it clicks, and then close the door. There's a battery underneath that of course you'll need to load in. It's got a weird little crank arm here, but turn it to the side. Again, spring operates. Then hit that switch and the battery pops right out. If you are planning to do video, I would suggest getting a couple of extra batteries because it goes through batteries fairly quickly when it films. It's not that bad. It's better than a lot of mirrorless cameras. But even if you're just taking pictures with it and you're going to be out for a full day on vacation, you're going to want to keep an extra battery with you because it will inevitably run out of batteries. Let's go over a couple of the ports on it. Over on the left side of the camera here, we have the most important port, the microphone port here, has an on-camera microphone, but you're going to get terrible sound out of it under even ideal conditions. External microphone always gives you better results, and if you're serious about video, that's the most important thing you can do. Of course, you'll need to listen to that audio to make sure the microphone isn't scratching it against somebody's clothes or the wind isn't hitting it, and the port right below that is for standard headphones. You don't need special headphones. You can just use your iPhone headphones. And the last compartment here has a USB port and an HDMI port. The USB port is primarily for transferring pictures, though you could run an app that would connect to it. For the most part, when I transfer pictures, I just take out the memory card and use a memory card reader. It's faster. This is USB 2, so it's painfully slow. The bottom port here is a micro HDMI port. For the most part, you're going to use that if you decide to record to an external recorder. We'll get into that a little bit more later, but it can output 422 10-bit color through the HDMI port to an external recorder, and it can't record that internally. So you can squeeze out better quality, though we've done some testing, and while you see better color, by the time you get it uploaded to some place like YouTube, you won't necessarily know the difference. So for YouTubers, I wouldn't go with that, but if you are doing broadcast quality 4K recording, that external recorder with 10-bit color can really help out. Now I'll talk about the process of just taking a picture, really simple stuff. Hit the switch up here to turn the camera on, and then just like every other camera in the world, you're going to depress the shutter button halfway to focus and then all the way to actually take the picture. So I'll depress that halfway. The camera shows green blocks and beeps to let me know it's in focus, and then I push it all the way to take a picture. Now, I have it in continuous shutter. It rattled off several pictures. Make sure you have it in AFS. That's what you're going to want to use most of the time for still photos. We'll discuss both those things a little bit later. Once you take the picture, of course, it plays the picture back for you automatically. If you want to look at it longer, hit the green play button up here, and it shows you the picture. You can then use the directional pad here to flip through the different pictures. And there's lots of information that it can show you about each picture. So when you're reviewing a picture, hit the disk button here, and it will show you metadata for the photo. So I hit it once and now it's showing me the aperture and shutter speed that I used, that I didn't use any exposure compensation, my white balance, all of that. Hit disk again and it shows me the RGB histogram. you can see that that picture actually looks a little underexposed because the right quarter of the histogram there doesn't have any data in it. I always want to make sure you expose to the right. Plenty of information about that in Chapter 10 of Stunning Digital Photography. Hit disp again, and it zooms in, but without all that unnecessary information, just letting me view the picture without too much clutter. And disp one more time brings me back to the original. So just hit that until you see the data that you want to see, and it will remember the next time you take a picture. If you want to zoom in to check critical focus, it's a touchscreen. I just love it. I just pull apart with my fingers now. I can zoom in and make sure every single pixel is nice and sharp. If you take a group photo, you're going to want to do that, and then just pan between each individual's face to make sure that everybody's eyes are nice and sharp. Another big benefit of mirrorless cameras with an electronic viewfinder is you can do all of that with your eye to the viewfinder. So if you're outside on a sunny day and you can't really see the screen that well, just hold it up to your eye and hit that play button and go through your pictures. It's also a great way, for example, if you're at a concert and you don't want to disturb all the people around you with your bright LCD screen, use that viewfinder instead. Now let's go over how to use Aperture Priority mode, which is my favorite camera mode. First, I've had it on the P program mode. A lot of people will keep it in the intelligent auto mode, but for the most part, those modes are modes that you use when you don't know how to use the camera. So if you ever get flustered and you don't know what to do about your camera settings, flip it back over to P or to the intelligent auto mode. Or if you hand your camera to somebody else, flip it over to those automatic modes. But for you, now that you are learning how to use the camera properly, you'll spend most of your time in Aperture Priority, Shutter Priority, or Manual mode. Aperture Priority, the A here, to turn this dial, you might have to click that button out. These dials can move accidentally, so I like to make sure that's locked all the time, because if you think it's in Aperture Priority mode and it ends up in Program or Shutter Priority mode, it can definitely ruin your pictures. So pop the button out, turn it, and then always push it back in to lock it. Now in Aperture Priority mode, we have direct control over the iris of the lens. That's the little opening inside of the lens that gets bigger and bigger when you need to let more light in, or shuts down to show more of the background in focus. When you have it in Aperture Priority mode, I'll hit the disc button here, looking at the live view at the back, so that we can see the camera settings. Now, the front dial here is going to allow me to directly control the aperture. So this lens has a minimum f-stop number of f2.8. So as I roll this main dial to the right, you can see the f-stop number here just increases and increases and increases. If I roll it back to the left, I use a smaller and smaller f-stop number. Now, if you aren't familiar with how f-stop impacts your pictures, low f-stop numbers blur the background more and let more light in, improving image quality. Higher f-stop numbers show the background sharp, but let less light in, requiring you to use a faster shutter or a higher ISO. So for the most part, you always want to use the lowest f-stop you can while getting your entire subject in focus. For detailed information, check Chapter 4 of Stunning Digital Photography. One of the nice things about this camera is that you can adjust everything using the touchscreen. So if you're ever unsure where the dials are, that's one way to do it. But another benefit is while you're filming something, you don't have to move these dials, which could shake the camera around. Instead, you could just gently touch the f2.8 and then pan it over here to the setting you needed, and then click set. And now you've changed it without really shaking the camera. Now go over Shutter Priority mode. Generally, I will use Aperture Priority mode because I am looking at my pictures and choosing the f-stop that I need to get my entire subject in focus and to give me the background sharpness that I desire. But Shutter Priority mode is the mode I'll use for action, sports, wildlife, anything where I need to be able to freeze motion. To use Shutter Priority, pop that middle button out, then move the mode dial to S and lock that mode button again. Now, this front dial here changes personality. Instead of adjusting the aperture, it's now adjusting the shutter speed. So as I roll to the left, you can see the shutter speed there. It's at 1/15 now. Roll it to the left, and I can go all the way to a full second. Notice that when you get into the full seconds, it shows a little quote mark there, which for some reason is the international symbol for seconds. If I roll to the right, it'll get faster and faster and faster. General shooting, people, portraits and such, you could do it 1/60th of a second. If you get into kids sports, like little kids, 4 to 8, 1/250th of a second is pretty good for things like basketball and soccer. It'll pretty much freeze motion while letting as much light in as possible. If you get into high school, college, pro sports, you're You're going to want to be at 1/1000th, maybe 1/2000th of a second. You always want to use the slowest shutter you can while eliminating camera shake and motion blur. So for me, there's often a period of experimentation when I get to a new ball game or I'm shooting a new subject, because I'll take a picture at slower and slower speeds until I start to see motion blur or camera shake, and then I'll go back up to a faster shutter speed. Slower shutter speeds let in more light, allowing you to use a lower ISO and get cleaner images. You want to go all the way to 1/2000th of a second if you need to shoot, say, flying birds. And above that, most of the time will just be used when you're in super bright conditions, but things like hummingbirds, you'll need to be up closer to 1/8000th of a second to actually freeze the motion. Now let's talk about using manual mode. It's not as scary as you might think, and in fact, Chapter 4 of Studying Digital Photography walks you through the whole process. To use manual mode, pop that center dial out, push it over to the M, not the M with the camera, just the big M, and then push this back in. Now, this front dial here controls the aperture, just as it did in Aperture Priority. The back dial controls the shutter speed. So now we have complete control over the aperture and shutter speed right at our fingertips. However, the camera by default will still take well-exposed pictures. So turn that screen off and switch back to live view. And you can see I can take a picture here and it looks good. And then if I decide I'm just going to go crazy and set it to 1/8000th of a second, you can see I still get about the same exposure. And that's because the camera is using auto ISO. Auto ISO the camera will adjust the ISO, the sensor sensitivity, up or down to give you a properly exposed image, even in manual mode. We'll discuss how to change ISO in a minute. I just wanted to talk about that. I actually love manual mode with auto ISO because I can control the shutter speed and aperture without so much worrying about the exposure. Now let's talk about bulb mode. By default, in manual mode or shutter priority, as you go to the left here with the shutter speed, you go past 1 second and all the way up to 20 seconds and finally to 60 seconds, a full minute. And that's going to be long enough for the vast majority of pictures. Most pictures happen at 1/30th of a second or above, but if you get into night photography, you'll start to take pictures at 1 or 2 seconds. And if you go out into the woods where you might be only under starlight, if there's no moon, you'll need to be shooting at above a minute to get a properly exposed picture. So the way you can do that is by using bulb mode. And to get to bulb mode, you'll scroll all the way to 60 seconds and then just do one more click over in manual mode. And that shows the B right there. Bulb mode keeps the shutter open as long as you want. You could keep it open for a split second or for 10 minutes if you want to. To open the shutter in bulb mode, just hold the shutter button down and then keep holding it down. It will stay open, gathering light, as long as you have it open until you take your finger off that shutter. So you could do it quickly. Oh, if you do a long exposure, it'll automatically apply noise reduction, which isn't going to do much for this since I'm in a brightly lit room and the exposure was completely wrong. So bulb mode keeps the shutter open as long as you have your finger on the shutter button. But if you're taking a 10-minute exposure, you probably don't want to stand there with your finger on the shutter button that whole time. That would be boring. But also, you'd probably shake your camera a little bit and ruin your picture. So what you'll do instead is you'll use a remote shutter release. So I just recommend finding a remote shutter release, a wired one. Don't bother with the wireless ones. You don't need to get too fancy. The wired ones are more reliable. And lock that shutter open and then just set a timer on your phone or get a remote shutter release with a timer and set it to the specific amount of time that you actually want to take the picture for. Just a quick break and I'll tell you about some books that I've written that help a lot of photographers get started. I teach both the art and the science of photography because it's so much more than camera settings. Things like your expression and your lighting and your mood, the storytelling that goes into your photo. Those have a far bigger impact on your photography than just picking the right settings. I'd rather see somebody who mastered the artistic side of photography using automatic mode than somebody who'd mastered camera settings but didn't know how to get a natural smile out of a model. So my book, Studying Digital Photography, will teach you all of that stuff with video. It's 9 hours of video now, but there's a new version coming out that will have 12 hours of video. And if you buy it now, you'll get all that video for free because I provide lifetime free updates. Never have to buy an upgraded version of it. I'll keep updating that for you as long as I'm alive. Once you get into taking lots of pictures, you'll find you can't locate the pictures when you need them to. Something like Adobe Lightroom can help organize your pictures and allows you to edit them, improving everything from landscape photos to portraits and everything in between. You need some piece of software to organize and edit your photos, and Lightroom's probably the best one, but it's complex. So I have a book about that too, with 12 hours of video. And finally, if you're into lenses and flashes and stuff, I can help you sort out the stuff that's worth it and the stuff that's not worth it, and help you really get some bang for your buck. I'll even show you how to save some money by buying used or refurbished gear. So check out my photography buying guide. All these are available for less than 10 bucks at sdp.io/store in either ebook or paperback formats, or just check on Amazon. There's reviews there too, if you don't trust me. And if you're not happy with something, just send me an email. I'll give you your money back. No restocking fees or time limits or anything like that. I'll just give you your money back. Now let's go over the different shutter modes. Shutter modes control how many pictures it takes when you hold your finger on the shutter. So if I click this over to the single box and push the shutter down, it takes one picture. If I put it over to continuous, now, I gotta get this out of bulb mode. So I'll just bring that shutter speed back up to 1/60th of a second. All right, now we're at a more reasonable speed. So I'm in continuous shutter here, and I'll just hold my finger on the shutter. That's a lot of pictures, right? This is a really, really fast camera. I love being able to use a high frame rate like that. That is continuous. The next one here, you see, shows a stack of pictures, but with like a plus and minus on it. That's actually bracketing, which we'll discuss in just a second. Beyond that, you have two different timer modes. This first timer mode puts a delay of 10 seconds on. So I just pushed it, and now you can see an orange light blinking and a beep. That's the time you run around the tripod and you put your arm around your family and you make everybody smile. It then takes the picture on the timer for you, and you can run back to the camera and start the whole process over again because your kid probably made rabbit ears behind your head or something. You can also change the amount of time that it waits. To do that, hit the menu button, then go to the self timer item here. It's on the camera settings menu, second page down, fourth item there. Select self timer, and now you can select between the regular default 10-second delay, a 10-second delay that takes multiple different pictures. That's really useful so you don't have to keep running back to the camera, or a 2-second delay, which is probably the mode I use the most often. With a 2-second delay, if you have your camera on the tripod, you can take a picture. It waits 2 seconds, and that gives the chance for any shake you've introduced by pushing the shutter to shake out, and it makes your pictures much more steady. Anytime you're using a tripod, I'll put that 2-second delay on to make sure my pictures are just as sharp as possible. The last item here in the shutter mode is the time lapse. It starts a time lapse, which is useful for you if you want to do star trails or make a time lapse video. To configure the time lapse, hit the menu button here, and then on the camera menu, page 2, the last item is time-lapse animation. So select that, and now you can select your mode, either between time-lapse or stop motion. Stop motion allows you to trigger the camera between each shot. Select time-lapse, and then select when you want it to start and the shooting interval. So right now it's configured to take a picture every 1 minute and 0 seconds, 1 minute even, and to only take one picture. So clearly you'd want to, if you were bothering with this, you'd want to have it take more than one picture. Just scroll to the right until you get down to the image count and set that, and then touch set down here. So now, when you put this into the time-lapse mode and push the shutter button, it will start that time-lapse, take those pictures, and blend them together into a video file for you. So now let's go over the different focusing modes on the camera. GH4, I love all the buttons and dials it has a dial for this. So this dial right here controls it. You can see the left option here is AFS, and that's single shot focus. So what AFS does is when I have to press a shutter, it locks on and then stops focusing. So even if I now recompose, you can see the camera is not trying to focus on the background over there. To refocus, I have to take my finger off the shutter and then push it down again, and once again it locks in, but I can recompose and it doesn't change the focus. So that is useful for focus recompose, but it's not useful for tracking a moving subject. If you want to track a moving subject, you'll take this and click it over to AFC. AFC will lock on focus, but then keep trying to find focus. So you see as I moved the camera away into the distance there, it locked onto the background. As I pull it back down, it snaps right back into focus. AFC is useful anytime you are shooting sports or moving subjects, but I wouldn't use it for general photography because it's not that precise on this or any other mirrorless camera. While you're shooting video, what I'll usually do is use manual focus because we found that using AFC during video recording is pretty unreliable. If you're actually filming a moving subject, it's probably the best thing to do unless you're great at focus pulling. But if you're filming a still subject, what you'll see is the focus will just kind of randomly move in and out, and it's really distracting to your viewers. For that matter, if you use AFS while filming, the focus will also shift in and out for no apparent good reason, even though it's not supposed to. So again, anytime you're filming, we pretty much bring you back to manual focus. And that's the last setting here. With manual focus clicked on here, you can turn the focus ring on the lens, and by default it will open up a little magnified display for you. That just helps you very precisely focus. This makes it so much easier and to focus precisely than you could, say, with a DSLR. Now, I also have focus peaking on, so you can see some little blue highlights around the edges there that shows that everything is nice and in focus, and we'll discuss that in just a bit. So I like using AFS most of the time, so I'll click that back over. Now let's talk about choosing your focusing point. By default, the GH4 will look at the entire scene and then decide what it thinks the subject of your photo is and focus on that. And it's usually right. It will just, you can see it's drawing multiple boxes. It can look at any part of the scene, but even as I'm just pressing the shutter repeatedly, it's kind of picking different subjects. It's fine. It's usually fine. But if you're dealing with shallow depth of field, for example, the shallow depth of field that you can create with this 85mm f1.8, even missing focus by a hair will completely ruin your picture. So in that kind of situation, you'll need to be more deliberate about the focusing point that you choose. And of course, the GH4 lets you change that. To change that, I'll just usually use the Q menu button here, FN2 right here. I'll push that. And now at the top up here, I'm just scrolling this left and right until I get to there. It's this selection here that allows you to choose the focusing area. So scrolling down to get into the area, you can see a few different options. Face and eye detection works okay. It works okay for portraits. You can try it out. It's not that reliable. It works most of the time. But then those times it doesn't, you can end up really frustrated, especially if you're trying to capture your kid's birthday party or some moment that can't be recreated. That's the moment when face and eye detection simply won't work, or it'll take forever to get into focus and it'll just leave you really frustrated. So for me, for the most part, I'll either use the 49 area AF and just let the camera decide, or I'll go over to the pinpoint focusing, which is also kind of slow, but it's a little more consistent. So now at this point, you can see it's always going to focus right in the middle there. And at that point, I could easily recompose if I wanted to. This camera also has a feature where you can just touch to focus, and that's so useful. You can see I'm just dragging it around, and it's automatically focusing for me. So in the event you were taking a portrait, for example, you'd want to put it on the person's eye, their nearest eye, and make sure that you nail focus on that part of it. So I'm going to remember to switch this back and change the focusing mode back to 49 points, because that's what I use most of the time. And in general, anytime you change a setting that's just temporary, be sure you go back and change it right afterwards, because you won't remember that you changed the setting the next time you pick up the camera, and you'll probably ruin a couple of pictures, frustrated why the camera's not behaving like it normally does. So now let's talk about metering modes. Metering is the process the camera uses to determine your overall exposure, what sort of shutter speed and aperture and ISO you need to get a nice, bright, contrasty picture. And by default, the camera's going to do a pretty good job. And this is a setting you probably don't ever need to change. Of all the settings you do need to change, this is probably not one of them. But if you do want to change the metering modes, hit this FN2 button there, the Q menu, and scroll through them. Metering modes, where are you? In the bottom left corner here is metering mode. And if I click up here, I can select between 3 different metering modes. Again, multi-metering, the best metering mode. If it doesn't do a good job, you can easily see it in the viewfinder and use exposure compensation to adjust it up or down. But for the most part, it's going to get it right most of the time. Center-weighted metering is held over from the film days. It takes a small section of the middle of the frame and meters based on just that, ignoring the background and things at the edges of the frame. And spot metering is a more extreme version of that, metering off of a tiny little area right in the center of the frame. So you can see the little plus mark is marking where the spot metering is occurring. And as I zoom in on the black part of this monitor, you can see the image gets really bright. That's because it's trying to make black gray. If I move it up to the white part, it tries to make the white gray. And that's kind of how metering works. But that's pretty dumb, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily want a different exposure for each of these. Instead, you'd want the camera to look at the blacks and look at the whites and kind of balance it all. Once you get into chapter 3 of Stunning Digital Photography, you learn about metering and exposure, as well as chapter 4, and you might realize that there's an easier way to go about this, and I'll discuss that in just a bit. For now, I'm going to be sure to set my metering mode up back to multi-metering. Now let's talk about changing ISO. ISO, which is not an acronym, it's a 3-letter word that's always capitalized. It's not ever said ISO, it's pronounced ISO. You can check the About page at iso.org if you don't believe me. ISO basically describes the sensitivity of the camera's sensor, what it does with the light that it gets, and how much it amps up the brightness of the picture based on the light that it has. At a high ISO, you could take pictures in very dark environments, and at a low ISO, you'd be out in the sun in tons of light, but you'd get really, really clean images. That's the most important thing to remember about ISO, is that higher ISOs give you noisy images with speckles of green, blue, and red, whereas lower ISOs give you nice, clean images that look beautiful when printed. To change the ISO, push the ISO button right here next to the shutter. Now, you can just use the main dial here to scroll and select the ISO that you want. Most of the time, you can just use Auto ISO. Once you start to understand ISO, you'll choose from the higher ISOs manually. I'll warn you that ISO 100 is an extended ISO on this camera, and therefore there's no real need to ever use it, especially if you're shooting RAW. It does not necessarily give you cleaner images. Shooting at ISO 100 is exactly like shooting at ISO 200, but overexposing the picture by a stop and then bringing that exposure back down. ISO 200 for still photos is the base ISO on this camera, and it's the best ISO to use. If you decide you do want to get into Auto ISO again, just hit that ISO button and then scroll all the way to the left. The first option there is Auto ISO. Now let's talk about Extended ISO, which I was just demonstrating with that ISO 100. By default, the camera will kind of hide that from you, but you can turn it on if you want to. Just hit the menu button, and with the camera option selected here, go down to page 5. The 4th option is Extended ISO. So I'll select that, and it can be on or off. If I turn it off, when I go into change the ISO again, you'll notice that ISO 100 is gone. For me, I always like to turn on Extended ISO. I know I just told you not to use ISO 100, but there are times when I want a longer exposure where I will just use it. Never hurts to have it there, right? Especially once you know that it's not necessarily the best choice. Now let's talk about how to use exposure compensation. This is a really, really important skill. So exposure compensation tells your camera how bright or dark the picture should be. Your camera meters the scene, but then you tell it to nudge it up or down using exposure compensation. To illustrate this, I'm going to take it out of manual mode and put it into Aperture Priority mode. Now I'm going to hold down the exposure compensation button here and then scroll the back dial. If I scroll it to the right, you can see the image gets brighter and brighter and brighter. If I scroll it to the left, the image gets darker and darker and darker. So a lot of exposure is just a matter of taste, and here, for this particular picture, I would want the exposure to be nice and bright of the screen. There are a couple of ways you can control how exposure compensation is set on your camera. I'll hit the menu button here to show them. Under the wrench icon here on page 4, there's this option here, Exposure Compensation Reset. And I strongly suggest you turn this on. Because earlier when I was telling you should always undo any temporary changes you make to the camera, the number one thing people forget is exposure compensation. So they'll dial in 2 stops of exposure compensation because their pictures were too dark. But then the next time they go to take a picture an hour later, they end up taking 10 pictures that are overexposed because they forgot to reset it. So exposure compensation reset will just do that for you automatically after a short delay, and it's a lifesaver. It will just save a series of pictures that would have otherwise been ruined. Another useful option is to configure exposure compensation to use one of these dials instead of requiring you to hold that plus or minus button down. I use exposure compensation a lot, and I hate having to coordinate 2 fingers like that. So once again, I'll hit the menu button here. This time under the wrench C icon here, I'll go on page 7 to dial set. And this third option here allows you to control which of the front or back dials configures exposure compensation. So as I select it, I can choose for either the front dial or the back dial to do exposure compensation. So like if you're a Nikon guy and you're used to using this back dial as your main dial, you might want the front dial to instead be exposure compensation. If you're used to working the other way around, if you'd rather this were your main dial and this were your secondary dial, then choose exposure compensation for the back dial. But for me, I'll put exposure compensation on the front dial. Now, I'm still in aperture priority mode. Now the back dial here is going to control the aperture, and the front dial here is going to control the exposure compensation. Just a little easier than having to hold this button down and moving the main dial, though that's still an option if it's a habit that you simply haven't broken yet. Now let's talk about a technique that's useful for creating HDR pictures, and that's bracketing. Bracketing was originally developed in the film era when metering was less precise and you couldn't see your results until a day later when you'd process your film and spent some time in the darkroom. Bracketing takes 3 or more pictures at different exposures. That way you're sure that one of those pictures is at the right exposure. The GH4 makes it really easy to turn on bracketing. Mentioned earlier, it's right here on the shutter dial. Right in the middle there. Just click it. It's got a little plus minus with a little stack of pictures there. Now, if I take pictures, you heard it take 3 different pictures. So if I hit the play button here, this was the first picture properly exposed. This was the second picture underexposed. And this was the third picture overexposed. You can also configure bracketing to take more pictures and to take them at different settings. To do that, hit the FN2 Q menu button here and go up to the upper right option. This option shows you that right now it's configured to take 3 shots at only 1/3 of a stop difference, which is hardly even noticeable. But if we scroll down here, we can go to a much more useful setting, which, well, of these settings, I'd probably do 3 and 1. But if you want an even wider range, like for a really contrasty situation, you could go up to 5 and 1, or even go all the way to 7 and 1. And the 7+1 bracketing is going to be enough for just about any scenario, even shooting in the sun with heavy shade. People don't necessarily need bracketing so much in the digital era, but if you want to create HDR pictures, well, your camera has HDR software built in, but it does a terrible job. So I don't ever recommend it. Instead, I recommend using bracketing, taking multiple pictures, and then blending those pictures together using software on your computer like Photomatix Pro. Check Chapter 11 in Stunning Digital Photography for detailed information about the process of creating HDR and making it look great without making it look cheesy. Closely related to exposure compensation is flash and flash exposure compensation. This camera happens to have a flash built right into it, and it's not great. It's kind of terrible. It'll ruin a lot of your pictures. To turn it on, hit the flash button here, and it pops right up. Now, the next time you go to take a picture, it will fire the flash, blinding everybody and casting ugly shadows across everybody's faces. But flash doesn't have to be overpowering like that. I'm going to turn off bracketing before I forget. If you take a picture and there's too much flash, it's really easy to dial back. To adjust the flash exposure compensation, hit your menu button here, and then under the camera menu up here, go to page 4 at the bottom. You'll find the flash menu item. And then the last item on the first page is flash adjust. So now you can dial it up, which you probably never want to do, or better yet, dial it down. You could probably pretty safely leave it on like a stop and a third. And that's generally going to give you more flattering pictures for those times when you actually do need flash. Now, a couple of the menu items here I'll just mention. TTL firing mode means that your camera will look at the scene through the lens, that's what TTL stands for, and try to give you the right amount of flash. Like I said, it's going to probably put out more than would be appealing, but it will properly light your foreground with the flash. So if you're just documenting things, that will work perfectly. You can also choose from a couple of different flash modes. These are also available on the Q menu. You can put on red eye reduction, which puts out kind of like a pre-flash that allows people's eyes to dilate a little bit and can reduce red eye. If you're actually taking portraits with this thing, I guess that could help, but you're probably going to want to either just use natural light or add an external flash. This next item down here is the slow sync and then slow sync with red eye reduction, but you probably won't ever need to worry about those. Now let's talk about white balance. Just like metering, white balance is one of those things that I usually just let the camera decide because it's easier to kind of fix it in post. I just took a picture accidentally on the camera. To change white balance, go ahead and use your Q menu here and scroll on over to the very last item on the bottom here. And by default, it's going to be at AWB, which is auto white balance, but you can just pick the setting that seems to fit the situation that you're in. Now, white balance can be a little tricky to understand because our brains, like our cameras, have auto white balance. So they're kind of automatically correcting everything. Now that I'm under these lights, this table looks totally white. But if I were to use incandescent lights instead, it would actually be a shade of yellow. But to my eye, it would still look white because my brain figures out the lighting in the environment and adjusts for it automatically. You remember that blue and black dress that everybody thought was white and gold? That's an example of how tricky white balance can be. It was just a picture that had a weird white balance and mixed both the weird white balance of the camera with the kind of auto white balance that our brains do. Anyway, white balance can be tricky, but it's one of those things where the camera gets it right most of the time, and the rest of the time it's easier to fix in a program like Picasa, which is free, or Adobe Lightroom. If you do want to change the white balance though, remember where it is. It's on that Q menu, the last item down here. Then you basically just pick the setting that's correct for the environment that you're in, incandescent lights, in shade, cloudy, or in full sun. But when you're done, set it back to auto white balance so you don't end up with a bunch of blue or orange pictures. Now, something important is the diopter. If you're a glasses wearer, the diopter can really make photography much easier by allowing you to take your glasses off and hold the camera right up to your eye. The diopter is this little dial right here, and to use it, what you'll want to do is you can hit this button to make sure that the live view automatically switches. Hold it up to your eye and then push that diopter until everything looks nice and sharp to you. I find it easiest just to look at the numbers that are written on the display. And the flip side of using the diopter is that sometimes it gets moved accidentally. It just gets bumped sometimes. And what happens then is people try to take pictures and everything looks blurry, and then they think there's something wrong with their camera. So it's important to know the diopter's there because at some point it's going to get pushed automatically and you will freak out thinking that everything is blurry. If it ever does freak you out and you can't remember, just use the live view on the back of the display. Now we'll start getting a little more specific. Talk about how to format a memory card. Your memory card, it's your digital film, and it will eventually fill up. It can store maybe 1,000 pictures, maybe 10,000 pictures, but eventually you're going to fill it up and you're going to want to reformat it. To format it and remove all of your pictures permanently, obviously you want to have moved into your computer. Go to the wrench icon here, and then go down to page 6. The last item here is Format. It prompts you, do you want to delete all the data from your memory card? Just click Yes, and it will erase all of your data. If you do that accidentally, don't take any more pictures. Take the memory card out of your computer, out of your camera, hook it up to your computer, and download a tool called PhotoRec. PhotoRec will scan the card and recover your pictures, and it does a really good job. I also want to show you how to shoot RAW. By default, the camera will take pictures in a format that's called JPEG. You've probably heard that term. JPEG compresses your pictures down a bunch and makes them small and easy to copy around, but it's also losing a lot of the data that your camera captured about the scene in the first place, including things like detail in the sky and the clouds, or detail that's hidden in dark shadows, and you'll never ever get that back if you're capturing JPEG pictures. But if you configure the camera to take raw pictures, it will store all of that data. And you can process it easily and automatically in a tool like the free Picasa or the not free Adobe Lightroom. Even if you don't edit your pictures now, you should capture raw, because in the future, you might want to go back to the pictures you're taking now and edit them and make them look better once you've developed your editing skills a little bit. Go to the camera icon up here at the top, go up to page 1, and then right here, the fourth one down is quality. So you can see a bunch of different options, and this first option here is JPEG with large, high-quality files. You want the last option here, which is RAW. Now, this one here in the middle that has RAW plus that means RAW and JPEG. It will actually save 2 copies of every picture, which is kind of a waste of space and slows your camera down and burns through batteries a little more quickly. So I just take RAW pictures. You'll be able to read them just fine in Picasa or Lightroom. Now, throughout this process, you've been hearing me focus and the camera beeping, and that drives me insane. Maybe it's because as a wedding photographer, there'll be such a beautiful moment. And I'll be dressed in black and trying to act like a ninja while grabbing my pictures. And then there's always some bumpkin on the third row who's got this like beeping camera that's just echoing throughout the chambers. Oh, I hate that beep. No matter where I am, I hear that beep. Do me a favor, turn the beep off on your camera. You can still look. It gives you visual cues to let us know and let you know it's in focus. To turn off that beep, go down to the wrench icon here, and page 1, the last item down, is beep. Touch that, and beep volume off. And while you're there, you can also turn off the volume on the electronic shutter. It has an electronic shutter that I'll show you in a bit, which can be completely silent, but you can hit that last item here, and that will make it not make any sound at all. The electronic shutter is great for being subtle. Now let's talk about how to set up your function keys. I've used the FN1 and the FN2, FN3, FN4, FN5. 5 different function keys that you can assign to do different tasks. And a couple of them are already useful. Like FN5 here switches the viewfinder in the back here with the viewfinder in the eyepiece, and then kind of automatically switching. You can see now it's stuck on the live view in the back, but now it's an automatic switching mode. So if I put my face to it, it'll automatically switch to the viewfinder. And that's my favorite mode for general use. But for recording video, sometimes I'll have it on a rig, and my strap or my hand will pass in front, and then the display goes away like that, and that can be terribly annoying. So when I'm in that situation, I'll usually push that until it's either on the viewfinder permanently or on the display permanently. And now, as you can see, it's not switching on and off. So I like that function key. And I like the Q menu function key here. The other function keys I never use for their default purposes, like FN1 here or FN4. So you can change those to do something more meaningful to your style of photography. Hit the menu button, and then under the wrench C icon here, go down to page 7. The first item here is FN button set. So select that, and then decide what you want whether you want to control the behavior of the keys in recording mode or in playback mode. Most of the time it's going to be recording mode. And now it shows you a nice little diagram of all the different buttons and what they do by default. So I don't care much about the Wi-Fi features. I could select that and then just set it to something that meant more to me, like a depth of field preview maybe, changing the photo style or the quality, or maybe turning on the self timer, using the electronic shutter or HDR. Whatever matches your style of photography, whatever you find the most meaningful is what you should set it to, and go through that for all the buttons. Wait until you've had the camera for a couple of months, because you'll find yourself digging back into the menus for different things. Whatever those tasks are, assign them to a function button. Make your life easier. Now I'll show you how to use a technique called back button focus. Throughout this demo, I've been holding the shutter button halfway down here and letting the camera just focus. And that works fine, especially for most beginner photographers. But at some point, you're going to want to take a picture without having the camera automatically focus. For example, if you're doing night photography, focusing can be a real pain. And when you finally get the camera to focus on something, you want to take 2 or 3 pictures of the same subject. But to do that, to take the second picture, you'd have to push your finger down on the shutter, and that would cause the camera to refocus, probably blowing your focus. So you could switch the lens or the camera into manual mode after you get it focused, switch it to manual mode. But an easy way to do that is to decouple the focusing system from the shutter button. So now, instead of the shutter button having this kind of dual functionality of focusing and taking pictures, it will just take pictures. And if you want to focus, you'll push this button back here. And for me, I use this all the time and on all of my cameras. Anytime I want to focus, I'll push this button here until it focuses, and then I'll take the pictures with my shutter button. It's odd at first, but you do get used to it. If you want detailed information about it, check Chapter 4 of Stunning Digital Photography. I'll just show you how to turn it on for now. Hit the menu button here, and under the custom item here, we'll go up to page 1, and the third button down here is AF AE Lock. That configures what this button does. We're going to change it from AE Lock to AF On. Now, whenever I push this, the camera will start focusing. The other task that I need to do is to decouple focusing from the shutter button here. So that's just a couple items down, which is Shutter AF, also on page 1 of this custom wrench icon. Select that, and then select Off. Now, with the configured for back button focus, you can see that's out of focus. If I hold the shutter button down, it's not focusing. If I want to focus, I push that, and it snaps into focus really quickly. Now I'll talk about using the electronic shutter, which can also be a completely silent shutter. Normally, by default, the camera uses the mechanical shutter, which kind of slaps up and down, makes some noise, and can slow things down a little bit. I love the electronic shutter on this camera. To turn it on, hit the menu button, and then under the camera icon up here, go down to page 4. The third item down is electronic shutter. Turn that on. Now, you might also want to go back to the beep setting. Oh, there it is. The beep setting is under the wrench icon here on page 1, 6 down. If you select that, you can change the electronic shutter volume, and I like to just turn it off. So now, it's a little freaky, but now you can just take pictures just about silently. See, it makes almost no noise at all. That means that I could be taking a picture of a wedding and not disturbing the people around me. Take pictures in churches or museums just much more subtly. I love the ability to take pictures discreetly like that. Now I'm going to just briefly show you where the Wi-Fi settings are. I'm not going to walk you all the way through it because, one, I don't find Wi-Fi to be all that useful. I find it to be kind of cumbersome. And two, things like the settings on your computer, whether you have an Android or an iPhone phone that you're connecting to, those are all going to vary from person to person. I don't want to walk through every single permutation. Software updates would end up ruining the whole video anyway, but I will show you how to get to it. First, if you haven't reconfigured FN1, you can just push that and it will take you to the Wi-Fi settings. Or you can go to the wrench icon here, page 1, fourth item down is Wi-Fi. Select that, and it starts up the whole Wi-Fi system. This camera actually has a great Wi-Fi system that can connect to your local area network, your Wi-Fi network, and thus to the internet, or it can connect directly to a PC or a smartphone. So under Wi-Fi function here, the first time you'll have to select a new connection, went a little too far there. And then you see you have a bunch of different options. You can either send pictures as you take them to a computer or a smartphone, or you can send specific pictures from your camera to your smartphone. That's great when you're traveling. And you have a couple of pictures you want to share on Facebook. You would select this and then select smartphone. And then what I'll usually do is use direct here. You select via network, you'll have to connect both the camera and your smartphone to a wireless access point. But direct connections are much, much quicker. And now you see, again, more options, but the right option for here is usually going to be Wi-Fi direct. Now the camera starts up its Wi-Fi system, and you can connect your phone directly to it, and then use the Panasonic app to transfer pictures and sync things up. Now let's talk about using the video a little bit. There's a lot to the video on this camera, so I'll walk you through it kind of step by step. Up first, the different video modes that you can do. Anytime you're recording video, you're probably going to want to be in this movie mode here, which is the M with the little camera right there. So I'll select that, and now when I go into the menus, get a different menu here, get the motion picture menu. And probably the most important setting is on page 1 here, the exposure mode. So when I select that, now you see the same options that are available on the dial here. Program mode, aperture priority mode, shutter priority mode, or manual mode. Aperture priority and shutter priority mode are going to allow you to control either the aperture or the shutter and auto expose the other settings. So if you're in aperture priority mode, you'll control the shutter with the aperture, the f-stop with the main dial, and then the camera will adjust the shutter speed to expose individual frames correctly. The shutter priority mode automatically changes the aperture, which is probably something you don't want. Most of the time, especially if you're serious, you're going to be in manual mode. You will specifically set the shutter speed and then specifically set the aperture and lock that exposure in so that the camera isn't automatically adjusting the exposure, which can look terrible in video. There are times when you want to use auto exposure if you're just not able to adapt to changing situations properly, but for the most part, you're going to want to be in manual mode. I do want to talk a little bit about the shutter speed on it. There's this kind of old rule of thumb where if you're shooting at 30 frames a second, you want to keep the shutter speed at 60 frames a second. If you're shooting at 25 frames a second, you would want to keep the shutter speed at 50 frames a second. And I don't especially like that. Through this technique, we came to get used to seeing films shot at twice the actual frame rate. So there's like a little bit of lack of smoothness to the motion, and that's fine if you're trying to recreate a film look. But for the most part, I think video comes out better. If you're shooting at 30 frames a second, select 1/30th of a second. If you're shooting at 60 frames a second, select 1/60th of a second as your shutter speed. Now let's talk about the different codecs and how to shoot 4K with this camera. Again, you'll need to be in the little motion picture icon here, and then you can go into the menu settings, and with the wrench icon here, go down to page 5, and the 4th item down is the system frequency. This is the first thing that you want to set, and you'll see 3 different options. NTSC, which is for North America, PAL, which is for Europe, and the last item down here, Cinema, is an interesting one, and that allows you to shoot at 24 frames a second. It also allows you to shoot the wider 4K format that's used for feature films, which is just wider than standard 16:9. So you'll see as I selected that, it tells me that I have to actually turn the camera off. So I'll turn it off, and then I'll have to turn it back on. And it seems silly that they created this system where you have to turn the camera off and on again just to select a different resolution. Now, when I go into the menu system, on the motion picture menu here under record format, I can select some different options. So as I go into I want to select MP4 here for this particular widescreen video. And then under record quality, I'll select that. And there are 2 pages here. Make sure you see that first page. So now you can see I can record at 4096 by 2160. This is ideal for film, not for YouTube. YouTube thinks 4K is pretty much 3840 by 2160 and 30 or 60 frames a second. But for film, you'd want to be at 24 frames a second and this wider format here, this top option, 4096 by 2160. Now, if you're going to be publishing your videos on YouTube or Vimeo or something that's not a movie theater, I'll show you how to get back to more standard 4K settings. So once again, we need to go into the menu system here, and under the wrench icon here, go down to page 5, change the system frequency to either NTSC or PAL. NTSC for North America, PAL for Europe. I'm in North America, so I chose NTSC, and I want you to reboot. So I reboot. Now, when I go back into changing the recording quality, first you can see I have a few different options for the format now that I've switched back to NTSC. AVCHD is good for general use, or MP4 too, but for editing, you'll want to always choose the MP4 format. Pretty much everybody serious about video is going to be working in the MP4 LPCM option. So with that selected, I'll go into the record quality here, and there's 3 different pages of options, but none of them include that 4000 pixel widescreen 4K format. You can see the widest I can get is 3840 by 2096. Generally, the higher quality options are right at the top here. So 2997, what we call 30 frames a second, is right at the top. And then we have 24 frames a second. And if you want to get to 60 frames a second, unfortunately, you have to drop down to 1080p. So here you can select your different options. If you want to do a little slow motion stuff, 1080p all intra is probably your best option. But for general recording, even if I'm publishing in 1080p, I'll record in this option here, 3840 by 2160. Makes really high quality video that beats every full frame camera out there at 1080p, at least once it's down res. So now let's talk about picture profiles, which can allow you to extract some extra dynamic range from your videos. The one we use is Cinelike-D, but I'll show you how to set those up. In the menu items here, under photo style, the very first option here, we'll select that. And now you can see I can scroll through a couple of different options. By default, it will be on standard, and that will produce video that's ready to share. Another option that produces video that's ready to share but looks a little better is Cinelike-V. Just how it basically grades your footage, whether it makes it brighter or contrastier or more saturated. So Cinelike-V is good for immediately publishing. Cinelike-D is good for editing. Cinelike-D reduces the contrast of the video, which sounds like a terrible idea. Why would you want lower contrast video? The lower contrast allows you to grade it later. So it will be recovering some of those highlights and recovering some of those shadows, kind of like shooting RAW versus JPEG. Not quite that much depth. But Cinelike-D is really good for fixing situations where maybe you're shooting into the sun and you don't want your subject's faces to be completely underexposed. If you know how to use even just the fast color corrector in Premiere Pro, Cinelike-D is the option to use. Then I'll just basically apply the same kind of grading to every piece of footage that we ingest. But I know that if something's being over or underexposed, that I have that extra detail in there that can be recovered. Anyway, it'll make sense once you start to edit, but Cinelike-D is definitely the way you want to film things for editing. So now let's talk about filming in 422 with full 10-bit color. If those numbers are making no sense to you, don't sweat it. But the GH4 by default films in 420 with 8-bit color to the internal memory card. And that video looks great. It looks fantastic. If you're publishing to broadcast television or movies and they require 10-bit color, or if you know you're going to be doing heavy editing and those extra 2 bits of color will make a difference, you can hook up an external recorder such as the Atomos Shogun, our favorite external 4K recorder, and configure this for 422 output. But it only works when you have that external recorder. The external recorder actually costs more than the camera. It goes for about $2K plus a couple of $100 for the drives. But again, if you need 422, that's your only option. You cannot record 10-bit color or 422 to the internal memory card. I also want to talk about sound. The internal mic, as I said, sucks, but you can hook up an external mic, and if you do that, you'll want to manually set the sound levels because by default the camera will try to automatically up or down the volume to keep it within a reasonable range. You can adjust the sound by hitting the menu button here, and then under the video camera, page 5, you'll see 2 options here, mic level display, which you'll want to turn on, and then mic level adjust, which you can adjust up or down. So as I'm talking, you can see it's picking up my voice, and by default, 0 decibels might be okay. It's going to kind of depend on the microphone that you're hooking in. If you see the levels getting really into any of those right 2 boxes, you're going to want to just crank it down, down, down until you don't see it peaking anymore. That's a little bit too low, but it's going to depend on your mic. If you have it all the way down and you still see it peaking sometimes, go to the microphone and lower the levels there. When you're done, you probably want to set it back to 0 so you don't screw yourself up too much later. Now I'll talk a little bit about adapting lenses. Because this is a mirrorless camera, the flange distance, the distance from the mount here to the sensor, is less than it would be on a DSLR, which has a big bulky mirror and probably projects more like this. This is great because that means there's room there, about ½ an inch or so, for you to stick an adapter in and connect just about any kind of lens, including 35mm lenses. But there's kind of a downside to it. And when you adapt full-frame 35mm lenses, you're only getting well, less than a quarter, about 1/5 of the overall frame. There's really heavy cropping going on. That means that your 50mm lens is actually going to be about 115mm when you're recording 4K video. This camera actually has a 2x crop when taking still pictures, or 2.3x crop when recording 4K video. So first, you're not getting the focal length that you expect. But then because it's using such a small part of the lens sharpness goes way, way down. And you're just not going to be getting sharp quality pictures out of it. So for the most part, especially for 4K video, which is pretty intense, I recommend people use native micro four thirds lenses like the selection that I have here, and then I'll go over in a little bit. But if you do adapt a lens, let me show you an important setting. Hit the menu button here, and then under the wrench C icon, go down to page 9. The last item here, shoot without lens. You'll need to turn this to on. Otherwise, when you adapt a lens and the camera doesn't recognize that a lens is attached, it won't let you take pictures. Just turn shoot without lens on and have fun with it. Now let's talk about manual focus assist, which helps you focus when you're manually focusing by automatically magnifying it. It's just a useful setting, especially when you're adapting lenses, since none of them will have autofocus capabilities. I'll hit the menu here, and again, with the C icon selected, I'll go down to page 3 and the 4th option down here. This lets me choose between a couple of different manual focus assist modes. This item here with the little boxes will just highlight on the screen when things are in focus. That little icon with the lens there means focus magnification will occur. So I'll show you, I have the camera in manual focus now, and as I zoom in, you'll see it makes a little box there that shows a close-up of what I'm seeing and just helps me out. Anyway, manual focus assist is a good thing to turn on, so make sure you go into your settings and turn that on. If you want to be able to autofocus and manual focus at the same time with non-adapted lenses, the option right above that, AF plus MF, just turn that on. That can be useful, though sometimes you'll accidentally hit that manual focusing ring and it'll be confusing when manual focus assist suddenly kicks on. Another useful way to help yourself manually focus is by turning on focus peaking. So to do that, hit the menu item here, again with the wrench C icon, go down to page 4, and on peaking, select on instead of off. And just to review what that does, you can see I have the peaking set to a blue color. So as parts of the screen are in focus, you see the blue appearing. Focus peaking highlights in a particular color areas of high contrast, which you could probably assume were sharp. It's not foolproof though. In fact, I can't tell you how many videos I've shot where I thought I was in focus by looking at focus peaking, but then when you get it back on your computer, you realize it's slightly out of focus. The magnification is very reliable. The focus peaking is helpful for getting in the general area, but it's not as precise as you would want it to be. Not on this camera or any camera I've ever used. You can also go down to the set option here with the focus peaking and choose a different focus peaking level and color. Low doesn't highlight as much, and therefore it's a little more precise, but sometimes you don't ever see it highlight anything, so high is a little more useful. And then you just want to pick a color that contrasts with the scene. So if I were taking a picture of an all blue scene, a blue peaking level wouldn't show up, therefore I might want to pick yellow or green instead. I also want to show you how to turn on the histogram. The histogram shows you how bright or dark the scene is, and it's useful for both still photography and video. So hit that menu button on the wrench C icon here, go down to page 4, the second option down is histogram, turn that on. So now, well, you can position it too, but right now it's shown right in the middle. I'm just going to drag that over to the corner. This is showing me how bright or dark my scene is. So now that I have it on the white section there, I'll crank up the exposure compensation. And you can see, well, cranking it down, it gets really dark. Lower that shutter speed and it gets really bright. And you can see the histogram is reflecting that. Now, especially for video, I'd want to make sure that no part of the frame was overexposed over the right edge. So I'd want to just adjust the exposure down until all the histogram is right in the middle there and using the right quarter but not going off the right quarter edge. Histogram is just a really useful way for double checking your exposure because you can't necessarily trust what the LCD display shows you. Sometimes depending on the lighting, it can just trick your eyes and you'll think something's properly exposed when it's not. Another video trick I want to show you is how to turn on zebras. So hit the menu button here, and on the wrench C icon, go down to page 5, and go ahead and turn the zebra pattern on. Zebra 1 or 2, just different patterns that it shows you. And now anything that's overexposed, let's go ahead and get this picture overexposed. Look at that crazy zebra pattern. Those striped lines mean that part of the frame is overexposed or almost overexposed, and that's a warning to you. Generally, when you turn zebras on, you'll be adjusting the exposure until those zebras go away, or they show up just in the parts of the picture you don't care are overexposed. So that's pretty close to being overexposed, which means it's probably a pretty good exposure. You can experiment with the 2 different zebra patterns to see which of them you actually prefer. And if you go back into the settings there, you can configure them and where they appear here. So Zebra 1 and 2 can appear at different settings, and you can look at Zebra 1 and know that part isn't overexposed, but it's at 80%. I really find them annoying, so I'll usually set them closer to 95 and 100%. I don't need to be warned about it until we actually get it completely and utterly overexposed. But you can see as I went from 95 to 100%, the zebra pattern there did change over to Zebra 2, just letting me know exactly where the exposure is. Now let's talk about the eye sensor and how you can configure it. The eye sensor is that thing that automatically switches between the viewfinder and live view in the back, depending on when you hold your face up, and it can be a bit annoying. Fortunately, they allow you to customize it. I say it's annoying because it switches on and off just throughout the day as things wave in front of the viewfinder. To change it, hit the menu button here, go to the C icon, go down to page 8, and the second option down is eye sensor. Now you can make it less sensitive, so it won't snap quite as quickly, but the number of times that it accidentally changes is less. You can also configure which is currently active from the menu here, though you can also do that by pushing this button here, unless you happens to have customized that. So now I'm going to go over some gear suggestions, stuff you should buy to get the most out of your GH4. It's going to go a little beyond lenses and tripods and actually get into some video accessories. First, I want to discuss Panasonic versus Olympus. And we have both Panasonic and Olympus lenses, and they both work on your GH4 or any Micro Four Thirds sensor. So excited about the Micro Four Thirds format because different manufacturers can finally make gear for each other's cameras, which means we have not just a handful of lenses, but dozens and dozens of lenses we can use. There is one big difference between Panasonic and Olympus lenses. Well, a couple actually. First, Olympus tends to build image stabilization into the body, so the sensor itself moves around to stabilize your pictures. Therefore, they don't put stabilization in their lenses. As a videographer, if you're going to be doing any hand holding or working on a shoulder rig or some sort of stabilizer, you probably want stabilization built into your lenses. Therefore, you're probably going to want to choose from the Panasonic zooms, like this 12-35 f2.8. You can see on the side here, it's got the Power OIS, which is Panasonic's version of image stabilization. And when I have that turned on, video is indeed much, much smoother and doesn't necessarily require stabilization in post, or at least not as much. Depends on how steady your hands are. Another difference is that the Panasonic lenses do not come with a lens hood. And for video, you probably want to be using a lens hood so you don't get any flare that's not deliberate, at least. The Olympus lenses do come with a lens hood. That just means that when you buy a Panasonic lens, go search for a lens hood. It'll cost you 10 or 15 bucks extra, but you'll just have to buy it so that you always have it handy. Lens hoods are also good if you might be shooting in the rain or drizzle or something to help keep droplets off the front of the lens. Now I'll go over some of my favorite lenses. First up is the one that my man over here, Justin, is currently using to film all the close-ups. That's why I can't show it to you. It is the Panasonic 14-140. It has image stabilization built in and this fantastic zoom range, which is good for general filming at an equivalent of like 28 millimeters or so at the 2.3x crop factor when you're shooting in 4K. All the way out to close to 300 millimeters. It's enough for like even some light wildlife type work. It's sharp enough for 4K video. It's also a great general shooter if you're shooting still photos. I love to take this lens on vacation because it's a nice super zoom that produces reasonably sharp results and doesn't require you to change lenses all the time. Only costs about 550 bucks. And if you use my link here, stp.io/p140, I'll get just a few pennies out of every dollar that you spend. helps to support me in what I'm doing. So use that link and say thank you. The lens I have on the camera now is a little bit of a more serious lens. Costs $1,000. It's the 12 to 35 f2.8. So if you were a 35 millimeter shooter in the past, this would be equivalent to a 24 to 70 f5.6 lens. It gathers more light than the previous lens, or probably the kit lens that you got. It's not any sharper, really. Still, on a camera like this, produces images that are about 9 megapixels. That's plenty for 4K, which is only an 8 megapixel format, so you'll be getting pretty sharp images out of it. The zoom range isn't as great, but if you're working in low light, this is the lens that you need because it lets in about 4 times more light than a standard f5.6 lens, allowing you to work at, say, ISO 200 instead of ISO 800, giving you cleaner video. I'd also like to talk about this little just all-in-one lens, which is great for when I'm traveling and I'm just kind of getting snapshots. The 20 millimeter f1.7 lens. There's a bunch of different lenses, varieties of it from Panasonic and Olympus, and the differences don't so much matter. I've read that the sharpest of them is the first original Panasonic 20 millimeter f1.7. As a result, I actually have 2. I use it all the time. They are nice and sharp, very small and lightweight. And when I'm out with the family, I'll slap that on the GH4. It's nice and small and versatile. It's about an equivalent of about 40 millimeters, which is really nice for just general shooting. Another lens that I can't show you because I'm using it is my Olympus 45 millimeter f1.8, and that's the lens that I'm using right here. I'm not using it as a portrait lens now, but it's very sharp and makes just great portraits with really nice background blur. It's roughly equivalent to a 90 millimeter f3.6 lens, so you'll get good and usable headshots out of it, and it's a bargain at only $400. You can find it there or get it even cheaper on eBay used. My favorite portrait lens, though, is the Olympus 75 millimeter f1.8. Oh, this is a big piece of glass, and it's roughly equivalent to 150 millimeter f3.6, but it's so much smaller than those full frame equivalents, and it's about the sharpest lens in the entire Micro Four Thirds lineup. It extracts an incredible amount of detail, and oh, just look at that aperture, how big that is. I love that lens. It also just feels great too. $900, check it out at this link here. If you get serious into video, you might become a little frustrated with the selection of zoom lenses from Panasonic and Olympus. There really aren't any super sharp or fast Micro Four Thirds zooms for some reason. So here's what people end up doing. They end up getting a Metabones speed booster, which is like a teleconverter backwards. It takes the light from a bigger lens designed for APS-C or full-frame sensors and channels it down into the Micro Four Thirds sensor size, so it has a crop factor of less than 1. It has a 0.71x crop factor, which means when you're shooting 4K video at 2.3x, you end up with about a 1.6x crop when you're using a full-frame lens. So this speed booster here, incredibly useful for the GH4 video, especially if you get the Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8. Get the Nikon mount because the speed booster currently only exists going from a Nikon mount to the Micro Four Thirds lens mount here. And once you get this 18 to 35 f1.8, with that speed booster, it'll behave more like a 29 to 57 millimeter f2.8 for 4K video, which is very fast, keeping in mind that this f2.8 lens would be equivalent to more like an f6.3 lens. So it's gathering over 4 times more light than you would be able to with any native Micro Four Thirds zoom lens, and it's razor sharp. It does not have stabilization though, so you'll want to use it on a tripod or some other sort of stabilizer. You'll also want to get into tripods at some point, and this is a cheap tripod that I recommend everybody start with. It's not ideal for videographers, but I wanted to throw it a plug because if you're using still photos and you're just traveling, this is a great all-in-one tripod, the Dolica. Check it out here at sdp.io/Dolica. $46, can't be beat. I like it more than any of the others at that price range. But if you get serious about video, you'll want to check out the Manfrotto. Here's a catchy name, MVH500AH, with the 755 CX3 head. That's the head that my man over here, Justin, is using again to kind of zoom and pan around. Provides, such smooth pans because it's got a fluid head. You can adjust the tension, you can lock it down. They're expensive. You This tripod, by the way, is a leveling tripod, which for video is so useful because you can twist that center column, get the head level, and then lock it in. That way, if you don't have a leveling head, then you end up trying to adjust each individual leg until everything is level. Or more likely, you're lazy and you don't level, and then when you pan, everything gets all weird and twisty. Anyway, if you get serious into video, you need a tripod with a leveling head, and you need a nice fluid head. And this is my favorite. This is what we use and what a lot of professionals use. So check out that particular kit for $680 at sdp.io/levelhead. Also, I've talked a little bit about microphones, but if you get to the point where you need to record 2 audio sources, like when we record both Chelsea and I, you can do that with the GH4 and no external audio recorder by just getting a $10 breakout cable. So this breakout cable has a 1/8 inch stereo connector here that you'll plug into the mic port, but then it has 2 mono ports. So we'll hook Chelsea's mic into one and my mic into the other, and they both come in as mono channels. And the camera just records them, and you can see them each individually when you look at the audio levels. Then when we edit it, instead of importing it as 1 stereo channel, we configure Premiere to import it as 2 mono channels. And then we can adjust the levels independently. So it's like having a 2-channel audio recorder built into your GH4, and it's only $10, works just great. Another must-have gadget you need for the GH4 is a sunscreen, because that display completely disappears in bright sun. You cannot see anything. You will never know if stuff is in focus or not. You can get this little LCD cover. It's pretty much the only one of its kind, and you know, it's Velcro. It's not like it's a great build quality or anything, but you kind of slap it on here and then strap it on, and it just stays put. So now I can kind of see in here to see my frame, and the sun is blocked out, and it just lets you see the screen in bright light, and without it you can't see the screen in bright light. It does allow you to kind of close it so you can still see stuff. Anyway, you'll definitely want one of those, and for $20 it will save entire shoots for you, no problem. The wireless mics that we use are fantastic, but expensive. The Sennheiser EW100 G3s, well, I'm actually holding a G2, which is a good bargain. If you can find a G2 used, it can save you a couple $100 and get you basically the same quality. I'm using it right now. Check it out at sdp.io/G3. We have several of them. They're basically bulletproof. You want to get some rechargeable batteries for them. Eneloop AA batteries are what we use, but the batteries actually last hours and hours, so we almost never have to worry about our sound. That wraps it up. I'll throw one final plug out for my books. You can check them out at sdp.io/store. But if you just want free videos, just click subscribe. And I hope you'll share this video with your friends, especially those who are getting into video. And if you have a friend with a different type of camera and you want to share this sort of tutorial with them, go to sdp.io/tutorials and you'll see tutorials for all sorts of different cameras. Thanks so much.